A stocking cap and a charred piece of ground are tragic symbols for a North Dallas neighborhood. They represent the failure of Dallas Power and Light to repair a downed power line and the death of an 8-year-old boy. Barton Clark, seen here 4 summers ago with some neighborhood playmates, died with one of them this afternoon. He picked up a wire that had been down in a back alley for 3 days, even though his friend warned him not to touch it.
He touched it, and I just saw him, and then I ran back and got my brother, and he came down here and knocked him off.
And I came there, and he was burning up, and I knocked the wire off of him.
The child died later at Medical City, and the death brought bitterness from parents who had been trying to get the wire repaired for 3 days. T.W. Gillespie, a former TP&L lineman, had spotted the downed line Monday and offered to show utility workmen where to find it.
That I had checked the lines all the way from the point where they were down to the substation on Beltline at Coet Road. It's just something that is unbelievable that a child would be killed. And this thing had gone for over 30 hours with their knowledge, and they knew it was a terrible situation. I had explained to them.
The fire department did visit the scene twice today to extinguish small fires started by the live wire. The line has now been cut, and the danger is gone. DP&L officials on the scene had no comment, but they had to face the anger of parents and the outrage of the boy who pulled the live wire from Barton Clark's grasp.
Let's kill them! Let's kill them!
Byron Harris, Channel 8 News.
300,000 residential customers have been asked to lower thermostats to 68 and limit electric use for only essential purposes. Dallas Power and Light has also asked that office buildings like the Campbell Towers be shut down altogether. Hundreds of people who work here went home early this morning. DP&L says the main reason for the request is the curtailment of gas supplies today by Lone Star Gas. That company says some of its gas-producing wells in Texas have frozen over, cutting supplies by nearly 400 million cubic feet a day. Some area power plants like Mountain Creek are not operating at 100% because of iced-up equipment. DP&L officials consider the power problem serious and say if voluntary requests don't work, they won't hesitate to call for mandatory cutbacks.
It could, if we have problems at the power plants get more severe, and if we find that the citizens' efforts are not helping a great deal, then we might, beyond that, have to consider going to a brownout, which would affect everybody. And beyond that, if the situation approached being a catastrophe, we might have to have selective blackouts all around the state.
While officials were asking for voluntary cutbacks, DP&L crews continued to make repairs throughout the city. As of late this afternoon, only 5,000 customers were still without power. Steve Bergen, Channel 8 News.
Some of the wealthiest areas of Dallas are among the hardest hit. Large sections of Highland Park have been without power now for 3 days. These Highland Park residents checked into the Hilton Inn on Sunday when the power went out to their all-electric homes, and they've been roughing it there ever since.
What have you been doing with your time here?
Playing a lot of rummy block.
Watching the bowl games, I presume?
Oh, we saw all the bowl games, right. And we've been visiting friends and eating out and, you know, going by your neighbor friends that still have heat and power and just kind of doing the best we can.
We're just fortunate we could go to a hotel and stay. I know that some people wouldn't have that choice or option.
Irving Palms and his mother, Ella Mae Payton, are among those people who aren't so lucky. The electricity went out in their Oak Cliff home on Saturday night. They feel fortunate to have a gas stove to keep them warm. But this morning, their cold water pipes froze, so now the toilet won't flush. The refrigerator has been out of power so long, the food inside has spoiled. And they can't get out to get some more because the streets out front are too slippery for the car. Nevertheless, they aren't blaming Dallas Power and Light for their problems.
I realize it takes time, because especially during when all the ice and snow was so heavy on the lines and on the streets, because a man can only endure so much of that cold temperature. Then he's got to come down and somebody else got to go. And then you got to get some rest. So it's just a matter of having patience and endurance. And I think I have plenty of that.
Carol Nealon, Channel 8 News.
All schools in the Dallas Independent School District were closed today. This morning, 27 of them were still without power. Fort Worth schools were also closed because of icy roads, and in Arlington, where schools were open, about half of the students didn't show because some stations had wrongly reported they would be closed. All schools were closed in Garland, all were open in Irving. Workmen were still clearing fallen trees when classes opened an hour late at this Highland Park Elementary School, even though many people here were still without power today. More than 80% of the school students showed. Only 4 of the 20 children in this second grade class didn't attend. But this scene was the exception rather than the rule. Most students in the area had the day off and took advantage of it, frolicking in the aftermath of the winter's first storm. But tomorrow it is back to school for these kids too. All schools in Fort Worth, Arlington, Irving, Garland, and most other districts will be open. Steve Forsberg, Channel 8 News.
Thousands of area residents today woke to find their homes without water, but with clogged drains and backed up sewage systems. Freezing temperatures inside many homes produced frozen water pipes. Plumbers reportedly were swamped with calls for help, but many frankly conceded such calls would prove futile until there's a thaw.
If someone has their plumbing system frozen, there's really not a lot they can do. Because right now we're wasting a lot of time. A lot of the plumbing companies are going out on trouble calls, spending 2, 3, and 4 hours charging the customer, still not able to resolve their problems.
To avoid the danger of busted water pipes, plumbing experts do advise one simple measure: turn off the hot water heater. If yours is a gas heater, turn the switch to pilot. If it's an electric model, turn the switch to off. And plumbers were not the only ones swamped with business as the ice started to melt. Tree trimming experts like Jim Holcomb began to put clients on a waiting list that already extends into next month. Running out of room for service orders, Holcomb had to line up requests on the floor of his office. His work trucks, however, sat idle as he advised clients to wait until frozen ice that still covers many tree limbs melts. He suggests owners brace weak or broken limbs with a simple 2x4 board and then call in an expert to save valuable trees.
I would guess in the city of Dallas that 50% of them, 50 to 60% could be saved. They won't look the same. It'll take years for some of them to get their original form back, but they can be saved.
Holcomb estimates that more than $2 million will be spent trying to restore damaged trees in Dallas alone. An insurance company spokesman concede most of that expense will have to be borne by the homeowner. Damage to residential trees and shrubs is covered in most standard homeowner policies in a number of cases: fire, explosions, lightning, vandalism, and theft. But experts warn less than 1% of area residents are insured against the threat of damage produced by the weight of frozen ice. Rita Flynn, Channel 8 News.
At midday, traffic was still stacked up on the interstate around Corsicana. Trucks jackknifed and cars slid into each other. Hundreds of motorists gave up the fight last night after travel became impossible. With motels full, about 1,100 motorists were housed in schools, churches, and the Texas State Guard Armory.
How many people did you house here overnight?
479.
How many were you expecting?
About 35.
Among the last to leave the Armory this morning were Tom and Nancy Sykes of Fort Worth.
We ended up in a ditch. We spun out and ended up in the ditch and sat there for 2 hours until we got pulled out and said, that's it, I'm not going any farther.
For the next 15 hours, the Sykes and hundreds of others drank coffee, ate cheese sandwiches, and tried to sleep.
Did you sleep any?
Some, not much. The floor was awful cold.
Others had to wait during most of the day today for their cars to be repaired after accidents or breakdowns. The Guard provided heaters, blankets, and food, but the trip home was still slow and hazardous, and conditions around Corsicana aren't expected to get much better until sometime tomorrow, when the temperature finally climbs above the freezing mark. Charles Duncan, Channel 8 News, Corsicana.
These people are going to the Pompeii exhibit, but that isn't the Museum of Fine Arts ahead of them. It's the Fair Park Coliseum on the far side of the park. And it's where the museum people want Pompeii visitors to pick up their free tickets. But a lot of folks showed up at the museum today only to find out they had to go get their tickets and come back.
Well, I just basically dumb enough to park by the museum. And they said you got to take a bus, and the bus never showed, so we just flew over here.
For a quarter, people can take a shuttle bus from the Coliseum to the exhibit and back. The idea is for them to park their cars at the Coliseum. And the reason, according to museum officials, is to handle the expected crowds by giving them tickets with specific times marked on them to get into the show, and by spacing the buses so groups arrive in orderly fashion. Museum staff and volunteer workers say there were a lot of complaints today about that arrangement. But once inside the exhibit, people seem to forget the inconvenience and concentrate on the ancient objects in front of them, listening intently to a taped lecture on the Roman resort town that was destroyed by a volcano in 79 AD and preserved for them to see. Later, they bought Pompeii souvenirs as if Christmas had not just happened. And there was one group from California who saw fit to walk back to their cars at the Coliseum, happy they got inside on the first day and beat the crowds.
I think the weather was a contributing factor. I think if we hadn't had this bad weather, we couldn't have gotten near it. We're from California, and we're just out here on a visit. In fact, we were leaving today, and we found out that there wasn't going to be such a crowd, so we came on over and walked right in. It was great.
Jane Horwitz, Channel 8 News.